So, Trikaya Buddhism has three core practices that we do. We have meditation, mindfulness, and contemplation. So, today I want to spend some time talking about our third core practice, which is contemplation. I think for most people, it's the most challenging of the practices because it requires us to get very, very real. We can learn how to meditate, meditation and mindfulness both, which are really very, very similar, but we approach them different ways. The danger of both meditation and mindfulness is they can be used as an escape. So we can learn how to train the mind. We can meditate, and if we're able to focus, we can go into these wonderful high states where we just feel this wonderful light coursing through our being. And then we come back from meditation and we start practicing mindfulness. We start training the mind. We start working on being fully present. And we discover that we have this amazing ability to actually move our mind from one state to another. So we can use beauty or gratitude to actually redirect our mind and change our state. So I've talked about these practices in the past. I will talk about them again. So as I said, these are our core practices. And so those two practices are indispensable on the path. I don't think, in my estimation, that at least on this path of Trikaya Buddhism, you're not going to move forward if you don't meditate, if you don't practice mindfulness. But as I said, you can also take that mind training, that ability to focus, that ability to redirect your mind, and turn it into a very powerful tool of escape, where you can have everything burning up and around you. You can be acting yourself very badly and then still be able to, in a way, disassociate and pretend that you're in this wonderful high state, even though you're hurting yourself and everyone around you. So that brings us to our core practice of contemplation. And contemplation has two aspects to it. The first one is this process of kind of digging through all that we learn from our practice of mindfulness. So as we're learning how to train the mind and we start to see the patterns that erupt, like we start to notice that, every time I drive on the freeway, I get really angry and I start yelling at the other cars. And then I can redirect my mind to beauty and gratitude for having a car and pull myself out of the state. But then every time I'm back on the freeway, I'm all tense and angry. And so that is a clue that there's something there for you to contemplate. So that's one type of contemplation, where we're noticing the patterns of our own mind and we take the time to actually investigate. The other type of contemplation is what I like to call mind candy, where we take a paragraph from a spiritual book, or we take a concept that we're curious about, like impermanence, and we just hold it in our mind and we kind of just let it roll over. Like, what is impermanence? What does that mean? And so we spend this time just contemplating, what is that? How does that work? So these are the two different avenues of contemplation. I'm going to spend a little more time. Well, they're both related. They kind of both come. So, but let's stick with the basics. The basic one is this process of digging. of actually starting to notice the patterns that are creating suffering in your being. And a good strategy for approaching this type of contemplation is to sit down either before or after meditation and to actually carve out a set amount of time. So you decide ahead of time, you say, okay, I'm going to contemplate this issue for 10 minutes. And you set a timer and you concentrate on just that one issue. This might take the form of writing. I'm a writer, so journaling is a wonderful way that I have found to kind of allow myself to dig through these issues. Another way is to write just an overview of, okay, this is the pattern that I've noticed. Let me sit here for this next 10 minutes and just look at this pattern from all the different angles that I can access. And as you're doing this, you'll need to rely upon what you learn through meditation and mindfulness, because what can happen is it can turn into a self-pity party where it's like, oh, poor me, I have to go through this over and over and over again. And that's where you use your mindfulness and say, oh, wait a minute. That's a detour into a whole different aspect of mind. But let me come back to what is it about this particular issue and circumstance that keeps pulling me back into the same mind state over and over again. So if we stick with this example of, every time I get on the freeway, I get angry and anxious, and I start blaring my horn and flipping people off and and just basically being a jerk on the freeway. But of course, you don't always see that immediately. Sometimes as we're sitting in our initial 10-minute contemplation period, where we're looking at the situation, where we feel the anger and the anxiety of being on the freeway. And sometimes that's as far as we get. So we just sit there for 10 minutes feeling and being with that and accepting that, oh, this is how I get in that situation. Interesting. With contemplation, as I was saying before we got cut off, it's a separate practice. So we have our meditation practice where we sit and we focus and we still our mind and we connect with our deepest, highest light that is all, and dissolve into that. It's beautiful. And when you're trying to meditate and still your mind and connect with light, you have these random thoughts come in that you start contemplating and considering and looking at, and then you never actually meditate because you were contemplating. But you really weren't contemplating either, because you were fighting it the whole time, saying, no, I'm supposed to be meditating. So instead, if you realize that, oh, wait, there's 3 separate practices. So let me carve out time for each one of them. So we carve out time every day. Twice a day is better to actually sit and meditate. And we practice mindfulness all day long. So when we're not doing anything else, any other practice, we're practicing mindfulness. That's our continual practice. And then it's really important to carve out time for contemplation that's separate from your meditation. So that means creating an open space in order to investigate and interpret the patterns that are happening. Some traditions will call this insight meditation. they'll call it meditation, even though it's really not. Because we're actually thinking, we're actually analyzing, we're looking, we're experiencing. So to go back to our example of road rage, so every time you get on the freeway, you get really angry. You know, this is a popular one in this country. You carve out that time. So I think 10 minutes is a good amount of time for many people. Depending on where you're at, you might want a little bit more, you might want a little bit less. But just like when you're disciplining your mind to meditate, decide ahead of time that, okay, I'm going to devote this much time to this particular practice. And that will help keep you on track. Because the mind is very crafty. You know, our ego, it doesn't like to look in the shadows. It likes to pretend that everything's okay. Just don't look underneath the carpet, even though there's a big bulge that we keep tripping over every time we walk in the room. Don't look at that. But in order to actually move forward on the path, we have to be willing to pick up the carpets. We have to be willing to look in the closets. Because Trikaya Buddhism, really all Buddhism, it's about awareness. You know, if you're interested in enlightenment, this is what enlightenment involves, is expanding awareness. It's about becoming aware, not just of the bright and beautiful, pleasing things that give us pleasure, but the other half of it, the pain, the source and root of our suffering, and being willing to look at that honestly and with humility, and accepting our responsibility that we contributed to this cycle of suffering. And when we do that consciously, so as we're sitting contemplating and we're looking at the situation from all the different angles, and if there's other players involved, we can do a thought exercise where we step into their shoes and look at how they may have been perceiving us. And then we look at, you know, how would the inanimate lamp be perceiving the situation? You know, the street lamp as we're driving down the freeway. Are we the one that is, how are we contributing to the suffering that we're experiencing? Because we can't control anyone else. We can try, we can drive ourselves crazy trying to control other people, but or trying to control this world, but it's just not feasible. You can go out to the freeway with your little stop sign and be like, stop, but you probably get run over. So don't do that. Instead, contemplate, look at the situation from all the different angles for the time allotted, and then when the time's up, allow yourself to say, okay, I'm done contemplating this. I'm going to go get up and move on and do something else. And this transition piece is really important. This is where your mindfulness practice comes in. Because when we start to seriously practice contemplation, the danger is getting caught in it. And then all of a sudden, instead of practicing mindfulness the rest of the day, we're just in this thing that I had a friend call mental masturbation, where we're just over and over and over obsessing and obsessing and obsessing. And we're not learning anything because we're not 100% focused on it. It's just this kind of spinning that's happening in the background. And then it starts to affect our thoughts and actions as we're interacting with the world, and it often causes a great deal more suffering. So just like if we were to try and meditate and quiet and still our mind and be 100% focused and then try to interact with people, it would be really challenging because we'd have this separation. We wouldn't be there with anybody. We'd be in our own little floaty world, disconnected. And if we were to try and drive in that state, we'd probably get in an accident. So the same thing happens if we're caught in the state of contemplation. We're just lost in our thoughts. So make sure you give yourself this hard line transition. So at the end of our meditation, we bow. We have gratitude. We say thank you. We then signal to our body and mind system that, okay, the meditation is over. So do something similar at the end of your contemplation. You can bow. You can say thank you for allowing me the space to look at this. The time's over, so I'm going to close the notebook. I'm going to focus on something else now. I'm going to switch my focus. Maybe I'll go pick up my to-do list. And actually get up and move around. And that can help get you back into a state of mindfulness, is connecting with your body. Doing some stretches or going for a walk, and then coming back to your to-do list and getting back with the rest of your life, putting the rest of your life in order. So that break is really, really important. Now, what we're doing with this practice of contemplation, as we're digging through, what we're looking for is the part of us that is stagnant, that's trying to hold still. Because in this world, it's constantly in motion. We're studying the I Ching right now, so you think of the Tai Chi symbol. It's like spinning. The hexagrams are always changing. The last one is beginning again. So anytime we become attached to something, anytime we have this idea in our mind that, no, I just want this to stay the same, or I'm so scared I don't know what's coming next, so I need to hold on to this even though it's burning my hand. I'm just going to hold on. So as we're going through contemplation, that's what we're digging for, is to look for what it is that we're holding on to so tightly, that we're trying to keep still. And when we see it, we can start to turn our mind to, okay, this is where I'm holding on. What happens next? What's the next natural flow for this to change into? Because it's going that direction. Whether you want it to or not, it's going to happen. But if we go with it consciously, then we can start to flow with the pattern. And eventually what we see, which you might not see right away, but what you might see someday, is there's larger patterns happening in existence. And you can kind of think of it like a fractal. So there's these little experiences, our own little personal dramas that are happening, and then there's, world drama or town drama, country drama, world drama, celestial drama, all sorts of drama. And it's possible to move our awareness from that little tiny personal drama out to a different part of the same fractal, and we experience it differently. And the less it's about holding our little ego intact, the less suffering we feel. But that doesn't mean that we get to avoid dealing with our own little ego. Again, that's the pile under the rug that we have to look at, because we'll keep tripping over it. But I just want to put that out there as a message of hope, that even though you experience the same patterns over and over again, it's possible to, as your awareness expands, you jump to a different part of that pattern because there's a larger pattern happening within. Does that make sense? I completely lose you guys. Okay, good. So this contemplation business is well worth it. And once you have your own life kind of running, and you don't have to put so much attention into it, in the beginning, or sometimes we hit speed bumps, we finally are ready, we have enough power to deal with the really dark closet, the cellar, or the attic. Forget, out here they don't have, not too many people have cellars, but the attic, the dusty corner in the closet. We find that we can use this contemplation to get ourselves back on a track, back on the pattern. And then we don't have to hold so tightly, and our awareness expands. Now, one thing that you'll notice if you keep looking, you keep with this practice. As I said, this isn't a 24/7 practice. This is some small little bites, 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes a week, however much you can handle. And this is something that, when it's a really personal issue, this is something that you can work with somebody as well. That's why they have this whole field of psychology. It's very beneficial for helping you see patterns and contemplate how it's working and what is happening to create suffering in your life. So there is a whole field available for help for that. So don't feel like you have to figure it all out by yourself. But as you start to notice these patterns, and you start to notice how this clinging, and you get stuck and you're attached within all of these cycles, these patterns, there'll be a point, a low point. And what invariably happens is, once you get through that low point, it changes and you start rising up. And then you reach a high point. And then from the high point, you start going back down to the low point. This is the natural flow and cycles of relative existence. And by contemplating, we learn not to be so upset by that cycle. We have this natural tendency that when we're on the upswing, we're all jubilant and yay, everything's wonderful, yes, awesome. And then we hit our pinnacle of like, yes, this is the best it could ever be. And then we come down. And you achieve the big goal. I published the book. It's selling, great. And then, oh wait, now I have to write another book. Oh wait, now I have to work on a different project. Oh wait, there's more. You start on the downward spin. And by understanding that it's a cycle, it's not so heavy, whether you're going on the downswing or the upswing. It's not so traumatic. It's not. There's recognition that, oh, it's gonna change. It's changing. It will keep changing. There's no end to this changing. And that's okay. That's actually the fun part of relative existence, is that no matter how things are, it will change. Once your day-to-day life is moving forward and you have your basics covered and you're not freaking out constantly, then you can add this other part of contemplation where we start to think about the bigger things. Where at the beginning I talked about this other side of contemplation, where we read a passage from a spiritual book and we hold that in our mind. It's a great practice to do right before you go to bed. That one I would recommend every night. Pick up a spiritual book and read a couple lines, and right before you close the book, but hold that concept in your mind as you go to sleep. It's a wonderful way to dream and do practice at night. Or you can pick a few minutes during the day. So maybe for 5 minutes today, I'm going to contemplate impermanence. What does that mean? How does it work? Where do I see it in myself and in life? And you just observe, and you, as I said, with contemplation, it's this witness consciousness that we're watching how it unfolds, and that delivers us a greater understanding of all of what's happening. So use that as part of your practice. And it works in concert with meditation and mindfulness, but it is its own separate practice. Don't mush them all together. Give yourself time to meditate. Give yourself time to contemplate. And in between, practice mindfulness. So, let's do some more meditation. Time we have left, we'll start on the navel center, and then we'll focus on the heart, and then finally on the third eye. So it's this practice of contemplation that moves us forward on the path. There's a popular movement that gets made fun of a lot. It's the whole love and light. People walk around in this positivity bubble where they're just love and light, love and light. And that works for a little while. You can, especially if you have a lot of insulation. You can pretend for a long time. But it's the contemplation practice that allows us to dig down and be real and actually discover where it is that we're holding on these deep-seated attachments that are creating the suffering that stops us from being fully real, fully authentic, from living in integrity and living this wonderful, high, bright life that is our birthright. So give yourself this wonderful gift of contemplation. Again, don't get lost in it. And if you find, like, when you're meditating or when you're just practicing mindfulness during the day, if you're getting run over by this train of thought that just keeps cycling and cycling and cycling, that's a loud message that a part of your being is begging you to sit down and contemplate it. So break out your timer, break out your journal or whatever tool you want to use. Some people like to draw. I'm very drawn to the arts, but you don't even have to do any of that. You can just literally just sit there and think. But give that one topic 100% of your attention for that time. And then when the timer goes off, you say, okay, thank you for listening. And you close the book and then stand up, stretch, and dance, do something, get back in your body, and then get back to the mechanics of your life, start practicing mindfulness again, and keep moving forward. So thank you for being here today. So nice to see you all.